I'm Charlotte Hayes, 34 years old, and tonight I stood outside the glass doors of a hotel I built from nothing, while my own sister told me I didn't belong there. The marquee lights of the Hayes Grand shimmered against the downtown skyline, reflecting across the rain-dark pavement like a stage I was never meant to step on. Inside, my parents were preparing to toast my father's 65th birthday, surrounded by friends who had never heard my name. I could hear laughter spilling from the lobby, the soft clink of crystal, and my mother's voice carrying through the revolving doors. "Don't embarrass him tonight," she'd said, earlier smoothing a wrinkle from her sequined dress. The words still echoed like a commandment. What none of them realized was that every detail in that lobby, from the marble floors to the champagne chilling on ice, existed because of me. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand quietly in a room where you knew your worth, but no one else did. I grew up in a family that measured success by titles and appearances. My father was a regional banking executive who ironed his shirts every morning at 6, even on weekends. My mother planned dinner parties with color-coded binders, and my sister Hannah was their pride, their polished reflection of everything they valued. She aced debate club, earned scholarships, and graduated from law school with an engagement ring and a newspaper mention. At our house, Hannah's achievements filled every conversation. My own milestones were footnotes, a scholarship here, a promotion there, acknowledged with polite smiles, before the subject turned back to her latest triumph. From the outside, we looked picture perfect. Inside, silence filled the spaces where affection should have been. My father wasn't cruel, he was simply indifferent. He respected efficiency, not emotion. My mother believed that if something wasn't worthy of boasting, it was better left unspoken. I learned early that my place at the table depended on how small I could make myself. So when I said I wanted to study hospitality management instead of law or finance, the look on their faces told me I'd stepped off the approved map. Hotels, my father repeated, half amused. That's seasonal work, not a career. Still, I went. At 19, I packed 2 suitcases and moved across the state. I started as a night clerk at a roadside inn where the wallpaper peeled and the coffee burned after midnight. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I learned to fix boilers, balance books, and calm angry travelers. I learned that the smallest acts, fresh sheets, a warm greeting could turn exhaustion into comfort. Those lessons shaped me more than any classroom could. Every job I took afterward built on that foundation, until eventually I could see not just what a hotel was, but what it could become. While my sister climbed the legal ladder and posed for firm headshots, I scraped together savings and took out small business loans. I renovated failing properties that no one believed in. I signed contracts that scared me and stayed up nights reading zoning codes I barely understood. My parents never asked what I was doing, and I stopped offering details. To them, I was still the girl folding towels somewhere off the interstate. I let them believe it, because arguing never changed their minds. By the time I turned 31, I owned 3 boutique hotels scattered across the Midwest. None bore my name, but each carried my signature warm lighting Art Deco lines and a quiet sense of belonging. The Hayes Grand, once an abandoned 1930s building, became my greatest project. I spent nearly 2 years restoring it, sanding away decades of neglect, until the marble gleamed again. When it finally opened, travel magazines called it a love letter to classic design. My parents never read the article. My sister likely walked past its name in a business journal and never realized who stood behind it. So when Hannah decided that Dad's birthday dinner would be held there, I almost laughed. Out of every venue in the city, she chose mine. She sent a group text instead of a real invitation, formal attire 7 o'clock sharp, and signed it. "Let's keep things simple this year." I wasn't on the guest list. I was an afterthought. She didn't even realize she'd booked her father's celebration at the one place he'd unknowingly helped inspire. I told my assistant Avery to accept the reservation without mention of my connection. The staff would treat the Hayes family like any other distinguished guests, nothing more, nothing less. Every detail would be flawless. My father's favorite bourbon would be served at dessert. The floral arrangements would mirror the ones my mother used to order decades ago when we still had family dinners that felt hopeful. I wanted perfection not for revenge, but for clarity. They would see what I had built when they walked through those doors, even if they didn't yet know it belonged to me. The night of the event, the lobby gleamed under soft golden lights. Musicians tuned their strings, and the scent of lilacs lingered in the air. I stepped from my car and straightened my black gown. My heart wasn't racing, it was steady, prepared. Then I saw Hannah near the entrance talking with a hostess. She turned, spotted me, and her smile hardened. "You can't just walk in," she said, blocking the doorway with a manicured hand. "This is a private event." I met her gaze calm and unshaken. "So am I," I said. Behind her, my mother appeared, adjusting her pearl necklace, as if that might steady the room. "Charlotte, please," she whispered. "Don't start something tonight. It's your father's evening." Her tone was clipped, rehearsed, meant to manage appearances. I opened my mouth to answer, but the elevator doors chimed behind us. A tall man in a navy coat stepped into the lobby. Raymond Cole, my father's CEO. His eyes swept the room until they landed on me, and his expression changed instantly. "Good evening, ma'am," he said with quiet respect. Every conversation in the lobby faltered. My mother froze, confusion flickering across her face. Hannah glanced between us, her lips parting, unable to place what she'd just heard. In that small pause, the balance began to shift. They didn't know yet who I was to this place or what that single word "ma'am" truly meant. But they were about to find out. The sound of that single word "ma'am" hung in the air longer than anyone expected. My sister's expression faltered. My mother blinked like a woman trying to process something she'd never rehearsed, and I simply nodded to Mr. Cole with polite ease. His greeting carried the tone of a man accustomed to dealing with people of equal footing, not subordinates. In that moment, something shifted, subtle, yet irreversible. Still, my family didn't know what had truly changed or how deep the difference ran between who they believed I was and who I had become. Growing up in the Hayes household meant existing under a constant spotlight that somehow never turned in my direction. My father led with precision, the kind of man who balanced his checkbook nightly and scheduled vacations 6 months ahead. He believed success came from discipline and lineage, from maintaining an image others envied. My mother mirrored that belief in her own way: charity luncheons, social calendars, spotless table settings, and endless mentions of Hannah's triumphs to anyone who would listen. Their world thrived on presentation, and I never quite fit inside that frame. Hannah was the reflection they wanted to see. She was graceful, talkative, and never out of step with expectation. From childhood, she wore confidence like perfume, filling every room before I had the chance to speak. My role became quieter each year. I was the older sister who stayed behind after gatherings to clear plates while they admired Hannah's latest certificate on the refrigerator. No one asked what I wanted. They already had a version of me that required no attention, the dependable daughter who didn't cause trouble, didn't ask for help, and somehow still disappointed them. When I told my parents I'd accepted a job at a hotel after college, my father folded his newspaper, looked at me over the rim of his glasses and said, "You'll get tired of that." He said it the way someone might comment on the weather, casual, dismissive, permanent. My mother didn't argue. She just nodded as though the matter were already decided. At the time, I thought maybe they were right. Maybe this path would lead nowhere. Still, I packed a single carload of belongings and left home at 22, promising myself I would learn what the world looked like beyond their approval. The first years were anything but glamorous. I worked long shifts at small motels and budget inns, learning every task no one else wanted to do. I scrubbed bathtubs, hauled laundry carts, balanced ledgers at 2 a.m, and listened to travelers talk about lives I couldn't yet imagine. I learned more about people during those nights than I had in all the years under my parents' roof. The owners of one roadside inn taught me the business side, how to stretch a budget, negotiate with vendors, and track occupancy rates without software. When pipes burst or guests complained, I stayed calm, figuring things out as I went. Each mistake became a lesson no textbook could have offered. The quiet years shaped me in ways my family would never see. They were building reputations in boardrooms and holiday newsletters, while I was learning to build trust, brick by brick, guest by guest. My promotions came slowly but steadily: front desk manager, operations lead, assistant director. By 27, I was running entire properties still invisible to the people who shared my last name. Every Thanksgiving call followed the same pattern: questions about Hannah's firm, a quick update about my parents' travel plans, and finally a polite, "How's work?" followed by silence before I could answer. Their disinterest hardened something in me. Not resentment, exactly, just distance. I poured that distance into ambition. I saved every dollar I could and took a chance as a silent partner in a failing boutique hotel on the edge of Denver. The building was old, with cracked tile and leaking windows, but I saw the bones beneath the dust. The bankers doubted me, the contractors underestimated me, and even my business partner assumed I'd step aside once the hard part began. Instead, I spent months on site, negotiating, designing, and keeping the doors open one weekend at a time. When the hotel finally turned a profit, I bought him out. It wasn't luck. It was long nights, sheer grit, and the refusal to quit when quitting would have been easier. Word spread quietly in the hospitality circles. By 31, I owned 3 properties across 2 states. I didn't chase publicity. I let the experience speak for itself. My investors and staff knew my name, but my parents still thought I was managing someone else's front desk. Once my mother forwarded me an article praising a remarkable Art Deco renovation downtown, completely unaware it was mine. She added a cheerful note, "You should apply there. Looks like a lovely place to work." I never corrected her. Explaining the truth felt pointless when the myth suited her better. The Hayes Grand came into my life when I found a listing for an abandoned hotel built in 1934. The ceilings had collapsed, ivy crept through the windows, and pigeons had claimed the ballroom as their own. Most people saw decay. I saw a challenge. The renovation took 18 months of dust, sleepless nights, and countless moments when I questioned my sanity. But when the last chandelier was rehung and the marble shone again under soft gold light, I knew it had all been worth it. The first guest who walked through the doors stopped in awe and whispered, "It feels like history woke up." That one sentence meant more to me than any compliment my family had ever given. The irony arrived years later, when Hannah, without a clue, booked our father's birthday dinner at the very hotel I'd built. She negotiated the reservation through my events team, complaining about the cost-changing menus and demanding something elegant but not over the top. My assistant Avery kept me informed, her tone half amused, half protective. I told her to say nothing about ownership. "Treat them as you would any guest," I said. "Make it perfect." It wasn't revenge. It was patience. For once, I wanted truth to walk in unannounced. When the formal invitation never came, only a group text reminding me not to be late and not to draw attention, I decided that silence would be my entrance. I reserved the finest private suite under my own name, but asked Avery to keep it discreet. I ordered my father's favorite bourbon from Kentucky, arranged for his preferred jazz trio to play during dinner, and approved every detail myself. The only instruction I gave my staff was simple: no one was to mention my connection until I arrived. The night before the dinner, I went up to the rooftop garden alone. String lights swayed in the wind, and the city glimmered below. I sat with a notebook, the same one I carried when sketching renovation plans years earlier, and wrote a single line: "Being underestimated has a cost." I closed it without another word. Tomorrow, they would see that cost in every inch of this place: the gold leaf trim, the scent of lilacs, the way each staff member carried themselves with quiet pride. Everything they overlooked in me had taken form around them. On the evening of the event, the hotel hummed with soft music and the rustle of formal attire. Avery met me at the entrance, discreet and steady as always. "They've arrived," she whispered. "Your sister's already asked to adjust the lighting." I smiled, knowing that sounded exactly like Hannah. "Keep things as they are," I said. "The room is perfect." She hesitated, then added, "Do you want me to prepare the staff?" I shook my head. "No need. They'll know when it's time." As I stepped through the grand lobby, the reflection in the marble floor caught me. Black gown, composed face, years of effort, distilled into quiet poise. For the first time, I felt no need to explain who I was or what I'd achieved. The proof surrounded me. The guests would toast beneath chandeliers I'd chosen, dine on recipes I'd approved, and never suspect the woman behind it all until the right moment arrived. And as the music swelled from the dining wing, I heard my sister's voice again, sharp, familiar, dismissive. "You can't just walk in here." I took a breath and crossed the threshold anyway. Somewhere beyond the tables and laughter waited the truth I'd spent a decade building, waiting patiently to be seen. The moment my sister's voice echoed across the lobby, every eye seemed to turn. Hannah stood near the marble steps, her emerald gown catching the light, her arms crossed with the same impatience I'd known my whole life. "You can't just show up here, Charlotte," she said, her tone sharp enough to slice through the quiet music. I kept walking calm, measured the sound of my heels tapping against the polished floor. "I didn't just show up," I replied. "I was invited, technically." Her eyes narrowed. "By who?" I nodded toward the name engraved in gold behind the front desk. "By the person who owns the place." She laughed, the sound brittle. "You don't own hotels, Charlotte. You book them on discount sites." My mother appeared beside her, then smoothing the neckline of her sequined dress as if fixing fabric could fix the tension. "Please," she said quietly, "don't make a scene. It's your father's night." The familiar script. Keep quiet, keep composed, keep invisible. Before I could answer, the revolving door opened again, letting in a gust of night air and a tall man in a navy overcoat. Raymond Cole, my father's boss. He scanned the room, then smiled as soon as he saw me. "Good evening, ma'am," he said warmly, extending his hand. The word hung in the air like a spark. Hannah blinked, caught between confusion and disbelief. My mother's polite smile faltered. Mr. Cole turned to my sister with a courteous nod before looking back at me. "Miss Hayes, the renovations are even more impressive in person. I told half my team about your design work." "Thank you," I said evenly. My mother's clutch slipped slightly in her hand. You know each other?" she asked, her voice thinner than before. "We've worked together for several years," Mr. Cole replied easily. "Chicago and San Diego projects both under her direction. Your daughter is a brilliant strategist." The lobby fell quiet. Even the music from the quartet in the corner seemed to dim. I met my mother's eyes for the first time that evening. "Because no one ever asked," I said softly. Avery stepped forward from the reception desk, then her timing seamless. "Miss Hayes, the Winston suite is ready. The staff is in position and your father's bourbon has been decanted." I nodded. "Perfect. I'll join shortly." Hannah's mouth parted, then closed again. "Wait," she said suddenly. "What is going on?" Mr. Cole gave her a pointed look. "You should show your sister the respect her position deserves, especially in her own establishment." The color drained from her face. Before she could respond, my father appeared laughing with two of his colleagues. His smile faded as he sensed the tension. "What's happening here?" he asked. Mr. Cole turned toward him with an easy confidence. "Nothing serious," he said. "Just admiring your daughter's hotel. She's outdone herself." My father's brows knitted. "Her what?" I stepped closer, meeting his gaze. "I own the Hayes Grand," I said simply. For a second, he just stared, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed softly, thinking I was joking. "You own it?" "Yes," I said, "and 4 others." The laughter faded. Behind him, my mother exhaled slowly, the truth sinking in. Mr. Cole smiled. "She's one of my top partners. In fact, I work for her on 3 projects. My father's eyes flickered toward the engraved wall, then back to me. "You never said anything," he murmured. "You never asked," I replied. We walked toward the private suite together, the sound of footsteps echoing against the marble floor. The staff greeted me as we entered, their voices steady and respectful. "Good evening, Miss Hayes," said one hostess, pulling out a chair near the head of the long dining table. The suite glowed under warm lighting, white orchids, gold-rimmed plates, and crystal glasses catching the reflections of the chandelier above. My sister hesitated at the threshold, as if realizing for the first time where she was standing. My father moved slowly to his seat, glancing around the room with new eyes. Dinner began with quiet murmurs. The chef presented the first-course roasted pear salad with candied pecans, one of my personal favorites. My father traced the edge of his fork against the plate. "This is your menu, isn't it?" he asked. "It is," I said. He nodded without looking up. "It's excellent." That single word, simple as it was, held more meaning than any compliment he'd ever given me. My mother dabbed her napkin against her lips, her composure cracking for the first time. "Why keep it from us?" she asked softly. I thought for a moment. Because it wouldn't have mattered then, I said. Not until now. Mr. Cole smiled faintly from across the table. Your daughter's modesty is admirable, he said to my parents. I've met plenty of executives who couldn't manage half of what she's built. My mother gave a small, tight smile. We had no idea she whispered. I know, I said, not unkindly. Across the table, Hannah sat rigid, staring at the tablecloth. All this time she muttered, "We thought you were still working the front desk." I looked at her steady. There's nothing wrong with that, I said. She nodded quickly, embarrassed. I didn't mean, I know, I said again, and that seemed to quiet her. Course after course arrived, each one flawlessly executed. The staff moved with silent precision, anticipating needs before anyone spoke. When the main course came grilled salmon with citrus beurre blanc, my father paused before taking a bite. This was your recipe, he said quietly. Yes, I answered. He tasted it, then nodded again. It was the smallest gesture, but something in his face softened. The evening carried on the earlier tension, easing into quiet reflection. My mother spoke less, my sister almost not at all. Every now and then I caught Avery's glance from across the room, her silent question asking if I was all right. I nodded each time. When dessert was served, dark chocolate torte with bourbon cream, the waiter brought small envelopes to each guest. Inside were certificates for weekend stays at my other properties, a gesture I'd planned before any of this unfolded. Some guests smiled, others looked uncertain. My father turned his envelope over in his hands before setting it beside his glass. You planned all this, he said. I did. His voice dropped lower. And paid for it. I nodded. Of course. He leaned back, staring at the table for a long moment before saying quietly, I suppose I owe you thanks. You don't owe me anything, I said. Just honesty. As the evening wound down, people offered polite goodbyes, shaking my hand with new respect. My mother lingered near the doorway, still holding her clutch tightly. Charlotte, she said softly, you did something incredible here. Thank you, I said. She hesitated, searching for the right words, then added, I'm proud of you. It was the first time I'd ever heard her say it aloud. I didn't respond right away. I just nodded, letting the words settle in the quiet hum of the room. When the last guest left, the suite grew still. My father remained seated, swirling the last of his bourbon. I always thought you'd find your way, he said finally. You just refused to see where it led, I answered. He nodded slowly, the weight of years between us softening at the edges. Maybe so, he said. Maybe so. He stood then, offering a small, unsure smile before leaving the room. I stayed behind for a while, letting the sounds of the city drift through the tall windows. The staff began clearing plates, their movements respectful and quiet. Avery approached with a small folded napkin. From Leo, she said, handing it to me. Inside was a note written in neat cursive. Your family dines well, but you command the room. I smiled faintly and tucked it into my purse. The last of the candles flickered low as I stepped back into the lobby. The air felt different now, lighter, calmer, my footsteps echoing against the floor that once carried only doubt. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own story. I was exactly where I belonged. Behind me, the door opened softly. I turned to see Hannah standing there alone. I stayed behind, she said quietly. I just wanted to understand how you did all this without us. I met her eyes. Because I had to. She nodded slowly. I underestimated you. Her voice trembled slightly. Is it too late to start asking the right questions? I glanced toward the exit, then back at her. No, I said. But you'll have to walk with me. When Hannah asked to walk with me, we stepped out into the lobby where the chandeliers still glowed softly against the marble. The hotel had emptied, yet the air held a charge that hadn't faded. Hannah's heels clicked beside mine, her usual confidence replaced by hesitation. I still can't believe this place is yours, she said finally, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I didn't respond right away. The night had been long, and silence felt easier than words. You built all this. She continued, her gaze drifting toward the grand staircase, the gilded mirrors, the fresh flowers still standing perfect on their pedestals. We had no idea. We reached the entrance where the cool air from the revolving doors brushed against us. Outside, the city hummed in the distance, traffic lights changing late-night guests calling for cabs. I stopped beside the glass doors and turned toward her. "You didn't ask," I said, "not to accuse, but because it was true." She nodded, eyes down. "You're right. We didn't." She folded her arms as if bracing against a chill. "It's strange, you know, I spent years trying to impress Dad, and you just went and did something none of us could even dream of." Her honesty surprised me. It wasn't the tone of a rival. It was the sound of someone realizing how small her world had been. "You don't have to compare," I said. "It's not a competition." She gave a small laugh, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "In our family, it's always been a competition." Then she looked at me directly. "I didn't mean what I said earlier about you not belonging here." We stood there for a long moment, the lobby lights reflecting in the glass like a second world behind us. Hannah shifted her purse from one hand to the other. "Mom's going to have a hard time with this," she said softly. "She's already trying to figure out what to tell her friends." I smiled faintly. "She doesn't have to say anything. The truth will be enough." That seemed to surprise her more than anything else. "You're calm about all this," she said. "If it were me, I'd be furious." "I was," I said, "for a long time." But it stopped helping. A bellman passed by with a luggage cart, nodding politely before heading toward the elevator. When he was out of earshot, Hannah asked, "Do you ever think about coming back, to the family?" The question hung between us. I thought about the years I'd spent away, holidays, missed birthdays, unreturned, the silence that stretched so long it became normal. "I didn't leave because I stopped caring," I said. "I left because I couldn't grow there." She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I guess I understand that now." We walked toward the lounge where the faint scent of bourbon still lingered. The lights were dimmed, the bar stools empty. Hannah brushed her fingers along the countertop, glancing at the etched logo in the glass. "You really thought of everything," she said. "Even Dad's favorite drink." I shrugged. "It's still his birthday." For a while, neither of us spoke. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was simply new. Finally, Hannah sighed and leaned against the bar. "When you left, I told everyone you'd come back in a year. I thought you'd fail honestly." Her voice cracked slightly on the word. It's strange to realize I was wrong. I looked at her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. You weren't the only one. We stood there until the clock struck midnight. Outside, the last of the guests drove away. When I finally walked her toward the exit, she turned once more before stepping out. "I don't know how to fix everything," she said, "but I'd like to start trying." I nodded. "Then start by asking the right questions." She gave a small, tired smile and left through the revolving doors into the night. I stayed behind, watching the doors spin back to stillness. The staff had begun cleaning up their movements, quiet and practiced. Avery approached, holding her clipboard close to her chest. "Everything went smoothly," she said. "The guests left happy. And your sister well?" She looked humbled. I smiled faintly. "She did." Avery hesitated. "How do you feel?" I looked around at the empty space. The tables cleared, the candles extinguished the scent of polished wood and fading perfume lingering in the air. "Lighter," I said finally. "Just lighter." She nodded as if she understood. Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. "This came in from one of the servers," she said. "He wanted you to see it." Inside was a handwritten note from Leo. "The best service comes from those who understand both sides of the table." I folded it carefully and slipped it into my purse. "Tell him thank you," I said. When the last staff member clocked out, I walked alone through the lobby one more time. The chandeliers shimmered faintly overhead, their reflections stretching across the marble like ripples on water. I remembered the first time I saw this place years ago, the broken glass, the smell of mildew, the silence. Now it stood alive, warm and full of light. Every inch carried a piece of the journey that had brought me here, the nights without sleep, the doubts I buried, the strength I found in starting over. I stopped by the grand piano near the staircase and rested my hand on the smooth surface. Somewhere upstairs, a faint hum from the rooftop vents echoed like distant music. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the stillness settle. Then I heard the click of heels behind me. My mother was walking toward me. Diane Hayes never hurried even when she should have. Her posture was perfect, her expression calm, though her eyes betrayed a weariness I hadn't seen before. "You're still here," she said. "I thought you'd gone home." "I was about to," I said. She looked around the lobby, her gaze sweeping across the details she had probably admired earlier without realizing whose vision they belonged to. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "Every bit of it. Thank you." She nodded, then hesitated. "I suppose I owe you an apology. For tonight. For before that, too." "You don't owe me anything," I said, but she shook her head. "That's not true. I dismissed you for years, Charlotte. I told myself you'd chosen an easier path, something temporary. I never imagined—" Her words trailed off. "I'm not sure how to explain it. You made something out of nothing, and I didn't see it happening." I took a slow breath. "You didn't want to see it." She looked down. "Maybe not." Then more softly, "You have your father's drive. I see it now." I didn't answer right away. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded card, the printed dinner invitation Hannah had sent. "I should have sent you one myself," she said. "Properly." I smiled faintly. "It wouldn't have changed much." "No," she agreed. "But maybe it would have shown that I was trying." She glanced toward the doors where the night air pressed faintly against the glass. "You know, when I first saw your name on that building tonight, I thought it must be a coincidence. Then I realized it wasn't. It was the same handwriting I saw on your school notebooks years ago. You always wrote your name like you owned something." Her attempt at humor carried a trace of affection I hadn't heard from her in years. I let the moment rest between us before saying, "It's not too late to start seeing me for who I am." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I'd like that." We stood there, two women who had spent years speaking through silence, now searching for a new language. Finally, she reached out and touched my arm lightly. "Happy birthday to your father," she said with a small smile. Then after a pause, "And congratulations to you." When she left, the echo of her footsteps faded down the corridor. I turned back toward the grand piano, the light catching its polished edge, and realized the tension that had followed me for years was gone. The weight of needing their approval had lifted. What remained was quiet, steady, certain enough. Outside, the night deepened. The city's glow stretched across the windows like a promise. I gathered my purse, turned off the last of the lights, and stepped out through the revolving doors. Behind me, the Hayes Grand stood tall and silent, its name gleaming against the skyline, no longer a secret, but a statement. A week passed after the dinner, and the calls started coming one by one. My mother's voice messages sounded rehearsed, my father's were clipped and careful, and Hannah's came late at night, softer than I remembered. I listened to them all but didn't respond right away. The hotel ran smoothly, and for the first time in years, I felt no need to explain where I was or what I was doing. Each morning, I walked through the lobby before sunrise, the quiet air filled with the scent of lilacs and polished wood. It reminded me that peace didn't always come from being forgiven. It came from finally being seen. On Monday, I met Avery and Martha in my office to review the upcoming conference schedule. The glass walls looked out over the city sunlight spilling across the desk as Avery handed me a file. "The board wants you to keynote the hospitality summit next month," she said. Martha raised an eyebrow. "That's the one with the national press coverage, right?" I nodded. "It is. Let's accept." They exchanged a look that carried both pride and quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about publicity. It was about acknowledgement, something long overdue. Halfway through the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "Lunch. Just us." I hesitated before replying. After a moment, I typed, "Tomorrow, noon, the garden terrace." It was neutral ground, quiet and open, a place where conversations could start without pretense. Avery noticed the change in my expression, but didn't ask. "Family," she said lightly. "Something like that," I answered. The next day, the sky was clear, and the rooftop garden shimmered with sunlight reflecting off the glass towers nearby. I arrived early, asking Leo to set a small table under the trellis, where wisteria trailed across the beams. He arranged 2 glasses of iced tea, then slipped away without a word. When Hannah appeared, she looked different. No courtroom posture, no carefully planned smile. Just a woman unsure of how to begin. "This place," she said quietly, looking around, It doesn't even feel like it's part of the city. It feels peaceful. I gestured for her to sit. It's one of my favorite spots. She took a slow breath, folding her napkin in her lap. I owe you an apology, she said. Not just for the dinner, for everything before that. I didn't realize how cruel it must have felt to be invisible in your own family. Her honesty was disarming. I stayed silent, letting her speak. I was so sure I understood success, she continued. Grades, promotions, applause. But watching you the other night, I realized you built something real. And you didn't need anyone's permission to do it. The wind lifted a strand of her hair and she brushed it aside. Mom's been trying to process everything. She's embarrassed, of course, but mostly she's confused. She doesn't know how to act around you now. And Dad, well, he's been quieter than usual. I looked out across the garden, the city stretching wide beneath us. I didn't do this to prove them wrong, I said. I did it because I had to build a life that didn't depend on their approval. Hannah nodded slowly. I see that now. I think maybe that's what I've been missing too. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a photo, 2 girls sitting on the back porch of our childhood home, one holding a book, the other grinning into the camera. Mom found it in an old album, she said. She asked me to give it to you. She said you always looked happiest when you thought no one was watching. I studied the picture for a long moment. The sunlight, the faded wood steps, the quiet ease between us before competition ever mattered. We were kids, I said softly. We didn't know what we were supposed to be yet. Hannah smiled faintly. Maybe we can start over. Not as rivals, not as the sisters they compared, but just us. I nodded. We can try. We talked for nearly an hour about things we'd never said aloud. The pressure, the comparisons, the way every compliment to one of us felt like an absence for the other. When she finally stood to leave, she looked lighter. You know, she said Dad's company is hosting a leadership retreat next quarter. He mentioned wanting you to speak. He said your insight could help his executives understand integrity differently. I almost laughed at the irony, but the sincerity in her voice kept me still. We'll see, I said. After she left, I walked to the edge of the terrace, the wind cool against my skin. The city moved steadily below, unaware of the quiet reconciliation happening above it. I thought about how many years I'd spent chasing acknowledgement that no longer mattered. What mattered now was peace, earned, not granted. That evening, as I reviewed reports in my office, Avery stepped in holding a tablet. "You'll want to see this," she said, handing it over. On the screen was an article from Business Ledger, the hidden architect behind the city's most elegant hotel revealed. My photo accompanied the headline, along with a short interview I'd done months earlier about the importance of small business ownership. Beneath it, readers' comments filled the page, entrepreneurs, young women, and even former guests sharing how the Hayes Grand had inspired them. Martha appeared in the doorway, grinning. "Congratulations, boss. You're officially public." I smiled. It was bound to happen. She leaned against the frame. "You ready for all the attention? More ready than I used to be." Later that night, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, my father's voice came through steady but uncertain. "Charlotte," he said. I read the article. There was a pause. It was impressive. "You've done well." His words sounded unfamiliar, like he was still testing how they fit. "Thank you," I said quietly. He cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, too. I should have been there years ago. I should have seen what you were building." "Dad," I began, but he stopped me. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know I'm proud. I mean that." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said almost awkwardly, "Your mother wants to host a small dinner next week. Just family. No guests, no speeches. Think about it, will you?" "I'll think about it," I said. "Good night, Dad." After the call ended, I sat by the window watching the lights flicker across the skyline. The hotel below glowed softly in the darkness, its name illuminated against the stone facade. Every letter represented a step, every light, a reminder that the things built quietly often last the longest. The next morning, I arrived early again, walking through the stillness of the lobby. Leo was polishing silver at the bar, and he looked up as I passed. "Morning, Miss Hayes," he said with his usual steady tone. Busy day ahead. Always, I replied. He smiled faintly. Worth it, though. I paused. Yes, I said. It is. Before heading to the office, I stopped at the grand piano near the staircase. The surface gleamed beneath the morning light. I placed my hand on it for a moment, feeling the coolness of the wood. For years, I'd carried the weight of being underestimated. Now it was gone, replaced by something quiet but stronger. The day would bring new challenges, new eyes watching, and maybe a dinner that would test the fragile truce between us. But for the first time, I wasn't walking into uncertainty. I was walking forward, finally seen for who I'd always been. The following week unfolded quietly, but beneath the calm, I could feel something shifting. The hotel had never been busier. Conferences, weddings, private dinners, but each morning began the same way. I'd walk through the lobby before sunrise past the front desk, where Avery was often checking reports, and pause by the grand staircase to breathe in the stillness before the day took hold. It had become a ritual, a reminder of how far I'd come and how steady the ground beneath me finally felt. A few days before the scheduled family dinner, I received a call from Business Ledger. The voice on the line belonged to Ellen Briggs, a columnist known for writing thoughtful profiles on women who led with purpose rather than ego. Charlotte, she said your stories sparked a lot of interest. I'd like to do a deeper feature not just about the hotel, but about what it means to build something after being overlooked. Her tone wasn't probing, just curious. I hesitated, then agreed to meet the next afternoon in the Garden Terrace Cafe. When she arrived, she was exactly as I'd imagined, poised, calm notebook in hand, eyes that missed nothing. We sat by the window, the city glimmering beyond the glass. She asked questions that weren't about numbers or expansion, but about endurance. You were silent for years, she said. Then one night the truth revealed itself. What made you choose silence in the first place? I thought about my family, about the quiet years when success was the only language I could afford to speak. Because sometimes you have to build in silence, I said. Noise doesn't make you stronger, work does. Ellen smiled faintly, scribbling something down. And your family? How are things now? I looked down at my cup, the steam curling upward. Better, I said. Not perfect, but better. She didn't push further. Instead, she closed her notebook and said, That's usually how real peace begins. The next morning, the article went live. The architect of her own story. The headline read, It spread quickly, shared across local media, picked up by regional business networks, and even reposted by Raymond Cole's firm. By midday, my phone buzzed with messages from investors, colleagues, and old classmates, but the one that stood out came from my father. Proud of you. See you Sunday. Dad. It was the first text he'd ever sent me without corrections or formality. Sunday arrived warm and bright, the air scented with spring rain. The dinner would be at my parents' home, the first invitation I'd received in nearly a decade. I almost declined, but something in my father's tone during our last call made me accept. As I drove through the old neighborhood, the streets looked smaller than I remembered. The house itself hadn't changed much, the same white shutters, the same oak tree shading the driveway, but the moment I stepped inside, the air felt different. My mother greeted me at the door. Charlotte, she said, her voice careful but warm. She looked like she had aged less from years and more from humility. You look lovely. I thanked her, setting down a small gift, a framed photo of the Hayes Grand's grand opening. I thought you might like to see where the story really began, I said. She smiled softly, touching the edge of the frame. It's beautiful, she whispered. The dining table was smaller than the one from the hotel suite, but no less polished. My father stood at the far end, sleeves rolled up, setting down glasses himself. Didn't trust anyone else to do it right? I asked. He looked up startled, then laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Maybe I'm learning. Hannah was already seated, her hair pulled back, a modest bouquet of tulips beside her plate. Hi, she said simply. Hi, I replied. Dinner began without ceremony. No speeches, no performances, just quiet conversation. For a while, it was almost ordinary. My father asked about upcoming projects. My mother inquired about staff I'd mentioned in the article. Even Hannah shared updates from her firm this time without comparison. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. When dessert was served pecan pie from my mother's old recipe, my father leaned back, studying me. "You know, I've been thinking about something," he said. "All these years I assumed I understood what success meant. But seeing what you've built, maybe I had it wrong." His voice was steady, not heavy with regret, but weighted with truth. "I worked so hard to maintain our image that I forgot what integrity really looks like. You reminded me." The table fell silent. My mother set down her fork, eyes glistening. "You're the reason people respect the Hayes name now," she said softly. "Not us. You." I felt the air shift again, not in confrontation, but in release. For the first time, I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to correct or explain. I just listened. Hannah broke the silence next. "Dad's company is planning to fund a mentorship initiative," she said. "He wants your input, something about supporting women entrepreneurs. I told him you'd have the right perspective." My father nodded. "If you're open to it," he said. "No obligations." I looked at both of them, the people who once measured my worth by proximity to Hannah's achievements. Now they were looking to me, not for validation, but for guidance. "I'll think about it," I said. "If we do it, it should matter not just to us, but to the people it reaches." Dinner ended quietly, the sound of dishes replaced by the soft hum of the radio my mother always kept near the window. Before I left, she pressed a small envelope into my hand. "Your grandmother's bracelet," she said. "You were supposed to have it years ago." I kept it safe, waiting for the right time. Inside, the silver band gleamed faintly engraved with a single word, courage. Back in the car, I turned the bracelet in my hand, watching the streetlights catch its surface. It didn't feel like a peace offering, it felt like acknowledgement, the kind that required no more words. When I returned to the hotel that night, Avery was still in the office finalizing payroll. "How'd it go?" she asked, glancing up from her desk. "Better than expected," I said. She smiled. "You look lighter." I laughed softly. "Maybe I am." Before heading upstairs, I walked once more through the lobby. The chandeliers shimmered overhead, and through the glass doors the city moved on steady, bright, alive. I paused at the base of the staircase, looking at the framed photo of the hotel's ribbon-cutting ceremony that hung near the entrance. In the picture, I stood alone, smiling without knowing who I'd become. Now that woman didn't seem so far away. She'd just been waiting for the world to catch up. The morning of the summit arrived clear and golden, the kind of day that made the city feel alive from the first light. I stood by the window of my suite, watching the skyline stretch awake. The Hayes Grand was hosting the closing event, a leadership dinner that would draw CEOs, investors, and city officials. For most of them, it was business. For me, it was something else entirely, the moment I finally stood in my own name without apology. Downstairs, the lobby buzzed with quiet efficiency. Avery was reviewing final checklists with Leo near the front desk. "The governor's team confirmed arrival at 7, she said when she spotted me. "Catering's prepped, sound checks are done, and Mr. Reed wants to walk you through the stage layout before lunch." She smiled, professional as always. "And your family RSVP'd for tonight, all 3. I nodded, trying not to overthink what that meant. The invitation had gone out weeks ago, an open seat at the head table, nothing more. I hadn't expected them to come, but part of me hoped they would. This dinner wasn't just another event. It was a reflection of everything that had grown from silence, resilience, and 1,000 small choices no one had witnessed. By noon, the conference floor was alive with voices and movement. Martha guided the operations team while I met Thomas Reed near the ballroom entrance. He was a tall, soft-spoken man with an eye for detail. "You'll be the final speaker," he explained. 5 minutes, short, but everyone listens by then. He adjusted his clipboard. "We've never had a venue run this smoothly. You've set a standard." I smiled. "That's the goal." After our walkthrough, I stopped by the rooftop garden for a quiet moment. The city shimmered below sunlight, catching the edges of glass towers. I sat at one of the tables where I'd met Hannah weeks earlier. The memory of that afternoon lingered, her hesitant apology, our fragile truce, the hope that something good might grow in the space honesty had left behind. I wondered how tonight would feel with all of us in the same room again this time, not as rivals or guests, but as family trying to rebuild something real. Evening arrived like a slow exhale. The chandeliers glowed, the string quartet tuned softly, and guests drifted into the ballroom in tailored suits and evening dresses. I stood near the entrance greeting colleagues and investors, but my mind kept flicking toward the doorway. When my parents arrived, I saw them before they saw me. My mother wore a navy dress, understated but elegant. My father looked older under the lights, but his posture was softer, his expression open. Hannah walked beside them, calm, composed, no trace of the defensiveness that once shadowed her. They paused at the threshold, taking in the sight the staff moving in rhythm, the golden light pooling across the marble floor, the air of celebration built from years of invisible work. My father caught my eye first. Instead of pride or guilt, there was something gentler there, understanding. He gave a slight nod. I returned it, and the evening began. Dinner unfolded with practiced grace. Courses appeared and vanished like clockwork. Laughter filled the spaces where small talk used to hide discomfort. Mr. Cole was seated to my right, offering quiet congratulations between speeches. "You've earned this," he said. "Every bit of it." Across the table, my parents listened as executives discussed expansion plans and new mentorship programs inspired by the Hayes Grand's success. My mother's eyes shone with something close to awe. When dessert plates were cleared, Thomas Reed took the podium to close the night. "Our final remarks," he said, "belong to the woman whose vision turned hospitality into art. Please welcome Ms. Charlotte Hayes." Applause filled the room as I stood, the sound both distant and intimate at once. I walked to the stage, the soft rustle of my dress blending with the music fading behind me. The lights warmed against my face as I looked out at the crowd. Somewhere near the front, my family sat together, three faces that once symbolized rejection, now waiting to hear what I had to say. I spoke about resilience, about what it meant to build something from the ground up, without a map or a guarantee. Every foundation, I said, starts with belief, sometimes only your own. But if you tend it, if you honor the work, it becomes unshakable. I spoke of leadership not as hierarchy, but as stewardship, the quiet responsibility to lift others as you climb. When I finished, the room rose to its feet. The applause wasn't loud for the sake of noise. It carried weight, acknowledgement, truth. Afterward, guests gathered in clusters, exchanging handshakes and promises of future collaborations. My father approached first, his expression unguarded. "You were remarkable," he said simply. "I never thought I'd be learning from my daughter." His words landed softly, not as confession, but as acceptance. My mother joined him, her eyes wet. "Your grandmother would have loved this," she said. I smiled. "Then I'll consider that her blessing." Hannah slipped in beside them, handing me a folded program from the evening. On the back, she'd written a few lines in pen. "You didn't just build a hotel, you built a way back to us." I met her gaze, and for the first time since childhood, we shared a quiet, uncomplicated smile. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the ballroom lights dimmed, I walked through the empty space alone. The scent of candles and champagne lingered in the air. Chairs were tucked neatly under tables. The stage cleared the floor, gleaming. Avery appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand, her voice soft. "You did it," she said. They all did. I looked around, taking in every detail, the gold accents, the soft echoes, the stillness that followed joy. "We did," I said. Before leaving, I stopped by the grand staircase, where it had all begun months ago that night, when my family stood on the wrong side of the truth. The memory no longer stung. It had become something else, proof of how far I'd traveled since then. The hotel was no longer a shield, it was a testament. Outside, the city hummed under the night sky. My reflection shimmered faintly in the glass doors as I stepped through, the sound of my heels blending with the rhythm of distant traffic. Tomorrow, life would return to normal meetings, travel, the next project, but tonight, standing beneath the name that once defined my isolation, I felt whole. For the first time, success didn't mean being above anyone. It meant finally standing eye to eye with them, with myself, and with the woman I had quietly become. When the last guest disappeared into the night and the ballroom finally fell silent, I found myself standing at the edge of the rooftop garden. The city stretched below like a sea of lights, steady and alive, the hum of traffic rising like a heartbeat. The air was cool against my skin, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was chasing anything. I was home inside the life I had built with my own 2 hands. Behind me, Avery and Martha finished locking up the terrace doors. "You should rest," Avery called softly. "You've earned it." I smiled. "Go on ahead. I'll be right behind you." They nodded and left their voices fading down the stairwell. The quiet that followed felt full rather than empty, a kind of peace that didn't demand to be celebrated. It just was. I looked over the railing, thinking of how it had all begun. The years of being dismissed, the nights spent hunched over invoices, the mornings when I'd question if anyone would ever see me for who I really was. Every choice, every scar, every sleepless hour had led to this quiet truth: I didn't need validation anymore. Recognition was a gift, but self-worth was something entirely different. It was a foundation no one could take away. A soft knock echoed from the doorway. It was Hannah, her heels in her hand, her expression easy and familiar. "Thought you might still be up here," she said. I laughed quietly. "You always did know where to find me." She walked over and leaned against the railing beside me. The city lights reflected in her eyes. "You know," she said, "I used to think you left because you didn't care about us. Now, I understand you left because you finally cared about yourself." I nodded. "Sometimes that's the only way forward." She slipped her arm through mine. "Mom and Dad are downstairs waiting for the car. Dad said he's meeting with your team next week to discuss that mentorship initiative." Her voice softened. "He actually seems excited." I smiled at the thought. "Then maybe this time we'll build something together." We stood there in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. After a while, Hannah squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Not just for this, for everything." Her words landed gently, like the closing of a long open door. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." When she left, the wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the street below. I stayed a moment longer, watching the skyline fade into the horizon. The next morning came early sunlight cutting through the sheer curtains of my office. The staff was already busy preparing for the next wave of guests, their voices steady, their steps sure. As I walked through the lobby, Leo looked up from arranging a breakfast tray. "Morning, Miss Hayes," he said. "The city's still talking about last night." I smiled. "Let them." He grinned. "They should. You gave them something to talk about." By noon, I was back at my desk, the hum of conversation floating through the open door. An email from Ellen Briggs blinked on my screen, a follow-up to the feature she'd written. "You've changed how people see leadership," she wrote. "Not by telling them what it looks like, but by showing them what grace under pressure truly means." I read it twice, then minimized the screen. Compliments no longer felt like proof of worth. They were reminders that I'd stayed true to who I was. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, I walked through the garden one last time. The flowers glowed gold in the fading light, their petals trembling in the breeze. I thought of my parents, how they were learning slowly but sincerely what love looked like without conditions. I thought of Hannah and the way she'd stopped competing and started listening. And I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who believed she had to shrink to be accepted. She had been wrong, but she had also been brave enough to change. As the lights of the city began to twinkle again, I finally understood that justice doesn't always come with noise or applause. Sometimes it arrives quietly through growth, through forgiveness, through the simple act of standing tall in your own story. What mattered wasn't revenge or recognition, but peace. And peace, I'd learned, was built one honest choice at a time. Before heading inside, I took one last look over the skyline, the soft hum of life below, reminding me how far I'd come. "Being underestimated has a cost," I whispered to the wind, repeating the line I'd once written in an old notebook. "But being true to yourself pays it back with interest. If you've ever had to fight to be seen, I hope you know this, your worth isn't decided by who notices. It's written quietly in the life you build when no one's watching. And before you go, take a moment to think about what that means in your own story. If it spoke to you, share it with someone who needs a reminder, and maybe subscribe so we can keep walking through these stories together. Because sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that echo the longest.